Good afternoon. My name is Tyrone Terrill'll, and I'm sitting in today for Brother Al McFarlane. First, my condolences to Al and his family as they celebrate the homegoing of his beloved mother. But today, me and my big brother, Spike Moss, are going to co-host the show. So I want to first welcome the viewers to the show. I think you're going to enjoy the show. First time me and Spike have been on radio together in years since our days on KMOJ. So we're extremely excited to be Al's guest host. I want to encourage all of the listeners to subscribe to insightnews.mn. Again, subscribe to insightnews.mn. Today, me and Brother Spike are going to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Justice Report and our thoughts and positions on our beloved Independence Day. So with that, I want to welcome Brother Spike Moss, my big brother, to join me.
Glad to be with you today, brother. Condolences for the family, too. Brother Al, go back a long way.
So, brother, this is the first time that you and me have done radio together in years. I mean, what, has it been 10 years probably since we were on KMOJ?
You know what, Al, I'm going to tell you something. I have not really kept up with it. So if you come up with a guess, I'll just live with it. I will say this, though, publicly, we were too black.
Hey, all black everything. But no, Spike, I mean, you had talked a little bit yesterday. You had a couple of topics that you wanted to really dive in. And one is definitely the recent justice report that came down against the Minneapolis Police Department. And what does that really mean to Minneapolis? But what does it really mean to the black community? Because historically, we've been the real victim. Other people want to chime in and have their voice on police brutality, police discrimination. But what does this report really do for justice and equality and freedom from the police for our community?
Well, you know, it's like this for me, Tyrone. This was a problem that plagued before we got started in 1966 when they beat up a 14-year-old black girl in downtown Minneapolis in broad daylight for no reason, no crime committed. And from that time, we have fought police cases all the way up until Floyd died. And most of our victims were shot in the back. Many of them were handcuffed. Many of them that weren't shot and killed were carried under the bridge on Broadway or the bridge on Plymouth Avenue and beat almost to death or died from the beating later. And so the Justice Department has come in and out of here all those years. They go downtown, talk to them, and then they leave. And they never talk to the people who are victimized by this situation. Therefore, the city council has never acted, fired, suspended on our behalf, or charged on our behalf, or no mayor has. No civil rights department has, no human rights department has. Over at the Capitol, there were no laws passed by either the state representatives or the state senators or the governor. So we never had any protection in the state of Minnesota against white racism with that badge. So here you come in and you go on TV and talk about what you're going to do, but you talk about it from your perspective and the years you want to go back to. But here's what I know about murder, Ty, and you know I've been in and out of prisons for years. You used to go with me. When you commit murder in this country, it doesn't matter that the person is not caught. That case stays open until that person goes to trial and somebody's found guilty for that crime. So you can't tell the victims you're only going to go back a certain amount of years. We want you to go back to those crimes that were committed against us. But because you don't see us as the victims and we don't speak for the victims, you get to choose how far you're going to come back. I guarantee you, any African Americans that commit murder 20 years ago and are found out today, they're going to trial for that murder. That's the way murder is. Our assault cases might be different, but the one advantage we have, our assault cases are downtown in the files at the courthouse. There are people on good retirement and full medical and everything else that should have been hit with those charges. So as speaking for the victims, and that's who you and I and others stood up, Brother Keith, when he was in school, stood up for, these victims got to have their day in court. And for anyone to tell the victims how far you want to go back, when that wouldn't happen, if the shoe was on the other foot and those citizens were white, that case wouldn't close by law until that person that committed that crime is found guilty and goes to prison. That's my biggest problem with the Justice Department coming in, is they came in too many years without doing anything. And now that you come, you want to put a limitation on the victims. They also did the press conference, and the people who speak for the victims were not present or invited to be present to at least challenge them in terms of how did you come back with this decision, or what you want to do for us is really also what you want to do against us.
So, and the report is lengthy. So is the one by the State Department of Human Rights. Do you see any of those reports, either one, doing anything to benefit our people?
Well, only if there's a change, and the change has to be permanent for African Americans. They can't be the target anymore. The research they did, you and I always knew. You know what I'm saying? The cases that we did, we always knew. So unless they make some real changes, like I've said all along, Tyrone, let's start with an application. On most jobs, what's your full name, how much education you got, or what's your nationality, where do you live, how much schooling do you have, blah, 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 and that's it. But there's no box that says, are you an Aryan race? Are you a bigot? Are you prejudiced? Are you in any of these Aryan organizations? Check that. If you lie, fire at will, that would give us a head start on who gets that badge. Put that in that application, because you put everything in there to limit us. Do you have a record? Are you a felon? Do you have any work history? You do everything you can to stop us. But these type of people who get this badge and swear that oath are not the people that should have that badge. We want policing. We want good policing. We want police that are not breaking the law. We want police that are not race extremists. We just want good policing, because you can't live in America without police anyway. So the bottom line is America is too lawless to try to make it without police. But, you and I, we fought for people of Native American and African American to become police, become officers, to run precincts in our community. So we're not anti that, but we anti-racist, and we anti-corrupt police and the abuse they do to people of color.
But it took almost a year and a half, 2 years for these reports to be done. And I've looked at both of them, and reports are good. But if you don't have a mayor, a city council, a commissioner in you guys' case in Minneapolis, a chief of police, and others that stand up and say no to this kind of racism, prejudice, and discrimination, police brutality, then reports don't mean anything.
No, not really.
They get put on a shelf, they collect dust, and the attitude, and you touched on it, if they don't do a better job with the hiring process, the selection process,
coming through the door,
the recruitment process, and actually have community folks involved in that selection and hiring of officers, then you won't change the culture.
No.
One thing that we had in St. Paul was William Corky Finney. And during his 12-year tenure as chief, he was not popular by all the rank and file. But the one thing you knew in St. Paul was who was the chief. And everything stopped there. And until you have that kind of leadership in your department, where it's not about making officers fear the chief, but they have to respect the office of the chief. And until you have a chief that's going to stand up and put it in to that kind of behavior, then it does continue. And so have they done anything with these two reports to educate the Black community on these reports?
Not yet. As a matter of fact, speaking to what you just said, when Aaron Downell was our chief, our first African-American chief, just before he left, he'd already had 73 to 74 officers that he was going to let go. They conveniently got rid of that list after he left and never dealt with it. That's what we go through in Minneapolis. So it's a dog and pony show, as far as I'm concerned, if you don't see the real progress. The most painful thing for me in this whole issue, Tyrone, and you and others were with us when we hit those streets. Too many of our victims were shot in the back. The majority of our victims had no weapon on them of any kind. Too many were handcuffed. Too many were handcuffed and laid on their stomach with holes in their back. So it's a different situation when no one will stand up at any level and do the right thing about these cases all these generations. I don't know if you remember Sale Scott, which was the one that caused the way to be closed. All he was doing was coming from work. He was getting married in a week. He bought a house, a new car. He was coming from his job. He saw a man hanging upside down from the car. He stopped in the middle of the street, turned on his blinkers, see could he help, but it was really a police sting. They said in the morning, Sil Scott came at them and they were forced to kill him. No crime committed. But I had the actual pictures from the coroner's office where he was ordered to hold his hands up. And I could prove it because he had his hands in the air and the person fired the shotgun from the rear of his head. His skull bones was in the back of his hands, and the meat from his brain was up his arms on his hand with a cocoon across the car. You shouldn't lose a case like that, but yet we lost it. So when you look at that, and Tyrell Nelson at 15 years old, who you shouldn't have been at that party bothering those kids, nothing had happened. You run him out of there with guns. You said he came at the cops too, and you shot him in the chest. But I'm in the emergency room with Reverend McAfee, and we're looking at a hole in this young boy's back, 15 years old, the size of a coffee cup, straight through to the bed he's laying on, and was never shot in the back, had no weapon, no crime committed. Those are the easiest cases we should have won. We still lost. So Wilbert Nichols, who was handcuffed, laid on his stomach, handcuffed in the back, was shot on the ground. The bullet holes went straight through to the ground. We can't win nothing here because of the hate at every level. The county attorney wouldn't charge him. The city council wouldn't stand up. The mayor wouldn't stand up. So we never, ever got any help. So when you say what they're going to do, you got to deal with all of that for me. You got to go back in them files for me.
But based on that history, Spike, and brother, I remember all those cases all too well, particularly Tyrell Nelson, South Rain Scott. But there were others. But that's why I go back to the question of, will these reports do anything for our people? I mean, they're reports, 300-400 pages.
I'll speak to it like this. The Justice Department made a commitment at that last press conference we did over South at Bethel's Church, the Unity Community Team, and they brought several Justice Department people in. They swear they're going to talk to the community. I don't believe they can talk to community people and not come up with what we need to hear. Because most of them who are standing up the way you did, the way Brother Keith did when he was a teenager, if you interview them, you're going to get the meat you need. We're going to see what you do with that meat when you get it. That's all I can say about that. But I would never, ever say you're really ready to do it correctly when we still got all these open murders all across America that speaks to America and its police and people of color. And most of these cases, they're walking away from the way they were walking away from in Minneapolis and Minnesota. So I don't know, when the country hasn't changed before you and I got here, it was that way when you and I got here, that this generation now is looking at what we looked at. It's hard to say because these people are handpicked from the Justice Department. And that doesn't say to me you're going to deliver. That just says to me you sent them to town, but you've always sent them to town. And every time we left, we got nothing.
So then I guess it's frightening in some ways because most of our people, boots on the ground, don't even know about this report, don't really care about this report. All they want is a change in the treatment. In Ramsey County, our Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, along with the St. Paul Police Department and Mayor Carter, put a new thing in that officers would not stop people based on something hanging from their mirror, a tail light being out, tinted windows, and what we're being looked at really as predatory stop. We're trying to get other police departments within Ramsey County to adopt that. And what happens is the computer will do this. They will see you have a tail light out, right? The officer will be able to put in the computer, send Spike Moss a letter saying your tail light is out, 30 days to get it fixed. You'll never even get pulled over. Is anything like that being considered that in Minneapolis and in Henry County, where our largest Black population exists?
Well, I haven't heard that, but I'll say this about that, Tyrone. When you look at these things that they intend to do, you brought up the study that the Justice Department is doing. Now, do you remember the study they did that we were 3 or 4% apt to have something illegal in our car, but white people were 19%
Mhm.
having something illegal in their car, but we were the ones being pulled over. But that harassment empowers them that I can mess with you when I want. I can pull you out of the car in a rainstorm and make you sit on the ground, lay on the ground. I can pull you out of the car with snow everywhere, freezing cold, make you stand outside the car, lay in the snow. All that was part of humiliation, of empowerment, and what white people would consider white privilege. And so they didn't see anything they did wrong. As a matter of fact, a good example was when Al Flowers' case came up from getting beat by the police, and the lawyer said in the courtroom in front of all of us, "What gave you the right to beat Al Flowers the way you did?" And the officer who led that attack stood up in the courtroom, Minneapolis, and he said these words, "White privilege," and then he sat down. That's the attitude that you're dealing with when they stop you, is they're clear that this is under white privilege.
So, based on what we're talking about, what we've said so far, the reports don't mean a damn thing.
Well, I would say this, you're right, but I want to see also. But I also want to see young people understand, if they fail you, then put your feet to the street. If they fail you, don't let injustice become the call of the day. You still want your freedom and your justice. So if they come in with a bogus report, which I would expect, because that's where you're coming from, then put your feet to the street. It ain't over till it's over. We've had enough of the injustice, and we've been going through it too long. I can only imagine in the early 50s when I was a child, what were they going through? In the 40s and 30s, what were they going through? Because you couldn't even get to court. You just was dead.
Right.
And so you have an opportunity to at least push back. But I'd like to have hopeful thinking, but it's kind of hard, Tyrone, when you fight from 1966, case after case after case, and you win 99% of your lawsuits, but you lose 100% of all charges against white officers that you can prove are guilty, and got facts. Even when they gave me people who were shot in the back, and I went to the Urban League and got money so they could pay for pathologists for those families and prove they're shot in the back, we still lost those cases. So I won't be surprised at nothing they do. I'm going to watch them do it. And I hope they interview some people who understand this and not people who don't, you know. And if they don't, our facts won't be there, our information won't be there, and it's hard to believe you're going to do it if you had that interview and the victims weren't standing there with you telling you what they wanted.
So you said something earlier that
the victims weren't standing there.
That I found was very interesting, that the city and the department, the federal people had a press conference to roll out this report, but they didn't have you and other community leaders stand with them, so that the community could at least have some trust in the report. A lot of times with these kind of reports, they give it to community folks, particularly key community leaders, prior to it even being released, so you can take a look at it and be prepared to stand up at a press conference and support it if you've seen it, right? But if you haven't seen it, I wouldn't want to do a press conference with anybody and say I support something that
Not to support it, though. Not to support it, to take your position to that table because you know it's missing. You can't support something until it's done, but you got to take your issues to the table because they just missed you. And they dismissed the years you've been going through it and chose the years they want to deal with it. You can't support it till it's done. And then I'll say this about that, Tyrone. Why mediation was meeting in that last 7 years or whatever, all hell broke out in Carolina. The Justice Department came to Carolina and they got all the facts, all the information through the research you're talking about right now. They took the research back to the U.S. Justice Department and Carolina was left alone. So to your point, they're going to have to show me, because this is what they did to Carolina. And they had all the cases, they had everything. They got all the information and disappeared with it.
So we have two reports, and based on what you're saying, brother, nothing's changed. Nothing's going to change.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And the most we can do is be hopeful or prayerful that it will. And I say it from this perspective. And I want you to imagine this. If you're not willing to finally do the right thing in this state with everything that everybody knows, you're going to push some kids in a situation to shoot first just to stay alive. And you're shooting people with badges. We don't need that. They need to do right. They need to let these kids know we will give you respect. We will treat you as human beings, citizens, and taxpayers. We need to let them know that. Do not tell them survival of the fittest. That's not going to go good at all. And it's going to change all over the country if they don't change. They witnessed enough of it, Tyrone. I mean, even when Floyd died, look how many killings happened right after he died. Like it's a joke. Just kill some more. And then you got to the point, I'm going to kill your women too. I'm already killing your men and your young boys. I'm going to kill your women too, who bring forth your future from their bodies. So I think you're pushing them somewhere where I don't want to see them go. And it's really survival is what you're pushing them to, because I can't trust you that you're going to take me to jail. I can't trust you that once you get the cuffs on me, you won't beat me or shoot me. I can't trust you that you won't take me under that Broadway or that Plymouth Avenue bridge and beat the so-and-so out of me. So if that's the signal they're going to send, then we're going to be in more pain. So we can't afford to let them, to your point, get away with that. They're going to have to take this study and act on it. And we got to demand they do for the salvation and the right for our young people to survive. Because if you don't, our young people are going to protect themselves. I already know it.
But how does a study, no matter how well it's written, change the racist culture? And I believe it's one of the most racist cultures of any police department in the country. Matter of fact, even 8 miles difference between the St. Paul PD and Minneapolis PD is night and day. So do you believe that a report from the Justice Department will really change the culture of MPD? And that's why I raised the question about the fact about Corky Finney when he was chief in St. Paul, and he laid the foundation for the culture that went from Harrington to Smith to Tyler Axtell, and we're working on our new chief. He needs some work. We're working on him. But I look at Minneapolis, and you mentioned earlier our beloved Chief Arredondo. And I don't think the community really recognizes what a great loss that was.
Total loss. To
lose that kind of chief with that kind of commitment. And so I haven't met the new chief. I really had a need to for Minneapolis. But if he's the right leader at this very difficult time in our city.
I met with him. He is serious. He does know the situation. They can't fool him. And he's doing everything he can do to change it as fast as possible. But here's our problem, Tyrone, that speaks to what you're speaking to. No, a piece of paper can't change a culture that's been back in this state since the beginning of the state. When they did it to the first Native Americans, when they did it to the first blacks in an anti-slave state that made us slaves. That culture and that history is so deep that the second to the last study they did, it was the worst 5 states towards African Americans in the entire country. And of those states, it was Wisconsin was number 1 because of Madison and Milwaukee. It said Minnesota was number 2 because of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It said Iowa was number 3 because that discrimination and stuff was blatant from the top to the bottom, even though they don't have a black population. It said Illinois was number 4 because of the discrimination, the denial of opportunity, the mortgages, the businesses, and such. But it said Michigan was number 5 because everything you can think of from the top to the bottom was wrong. That means that the Midwest is worse than all of the South and what we thought about the South. So these individuals come from that culture in this state. So to your point, it's kind of hard to change the culture that they brought up with. And I'm going to say this even if it insults somebody. You and I both know our mothers were 85% of our nurturing. That's who told you, Tyrone, you got your shirt buttoned up wrong, button it up right. You got your shoe on the wrong foot. This is how you hold your fork or your spoon. Don't sing at the table. They give you everything to do with your nurturing. So when them white kids come out of those suburbs, their nurturing teaches them racism. You are 5, 6, 7 years old. You might not know your own full name. You don't know your mama's full name. You might not know your home address, your home phone number, but you know how to point us out, identify us, and say that word. And so as long as those nurturers teach that in every suburb in Minnesota, wherever these officers come from, they already come with this racist concept, and they want to live under that. But it also, because you get white privilege, which is a benefit from it, why not stand on it? So in Minnesota, yeah, they make them to order. And I'm sure you in your lifetime has seen a small white kid who pointed you out and said that word. You can't live here and it not happen. So the nurturer plants the seed very, very young. And even though you and I don't live in their neighborhood, we're not exposed to them, that kid will point you out in public and say that word. So that means that in Minnesota, it runs deep for generations. It has not went anywhere, you know, and in every level of discrimination, not just the beatings, we are last in this state. We're not even 1% of nothing in this state. So when you understand that, to your point, that would be a hard concept to think. You put it on paper and Minnesota whites who've done all this crazy stuff will change. You know, that's, you know, when you just look at the Native Americans alone, what was done to them, you know, you had plenty of time to change. I mean, to sit there and say back in the day in Mankato, we're going to hang 400 Native Americans in one day, no crime committed, men, women, and children. And for Abraham Lincoln to say, I can't let you hang that many, go to the Capitol steps and count those steps, and that's how many you can hang, and they hung them anyway. So by the time you got to us in slavery, in a non-slave state, this mentality just grew and grew and grew. And I don't believe there's any corner of Minnesota where what you're standing on don't live and live well and live large. I don't believe it.
Which, and when you bring up our indigenous community, it makes me think about all the battles that we fought with our brother Clyde Bellecourt.
Without a doubt.
And he would be right now with that police report out front with you and other leaders wanting to know how they're going to make policing better in our state.
Yeah.
But we only got about 18 more minutes, but I wanted to spend some time on this 4th of July, Independence Day, that just took place. And it's funny, we haven't even really talked about this, but I had folks asking me why I don't celebrate it. I said, well, it's not mine. They said, well, yes, it is. I said, no. On August 4th, 1776, our people were being raped, murdered, castrated, sold. Anything that they wanted to do to us was being done. And that's why I never tell people, I never fault when I hear white people brag about this day, because it is their day. They got their independence from the people in London, England, and in Europe. But it's not our day. And I was talking to my Uncle Sonny, he's the last of my dad's 7 siblings, who's 91 years old. He talked about a date that most Black people know nothing about. Is August 4th, 1865. And he talked about all as a kid growing up in Kansas City, he talked about all the parades and barbecues and parties and dances that took place on August 4th that Black people never celebrated. July 4th, 1976. And so what made you want to talk about July 4th?
Because I just don't think our people understand what this means to us. Can you hear me?
Yes. You're
okay.
Good.
I just don't think our people understand what this means to us to watch them celebrate that day, which is just a day of them disrespecting their king and unwilling to give him his taxes and stay part of their home country. But for us who have never experienced freedom, that went from slavery to some form of subsidized freedom, but not freedom, who were released from plantation and told to get without even a bag of seed or a shovel to grow something to eat without a roof. Some had never been off the plantation to even have direction where you're going when you live. To go from that to that period called the Nadine, some people say the Nadine, where they could murder us on sight and walk away, to go to that period where they created the chain gang to put us back into slavery, to go back to sharecroppers, putting us back into slavery, to get us all the way up to Jim Crow. So until we are fully under that piece of paper called the 14th Amendment, that says that all men are created equal with certain inalienable rights, except for the African American, he's 3/5 of a man, and the Native American, he's other. So we are given some privileges, but we're not under the law where we can be protected from one of their votes to change things and back up things that will harm us. So we shouldn't be celebrating their day of freedom and have not participated and had our own day of freedom in this country as human beings, taxpayers, and citizens. We're still called another race when you know yourself there's only the human race. There's different nationalities of people, but America is still promoting different races of people like it really exists. And so when you understand that, we need to celebrate our day of liberation. And until we have our day of liberation, there's nothing to celebrate. I also believe this, Tyrone, and I'm sorry to say it, but I believe it. For us to even survive in this country, we probably have to have sovereignty land somewhere. Sovereignty land where we can protect ourselves and live in our own space, so that whatever reparation we get speaks to building our place where we were born, not by choice, stolen, but born. That's the only way I think we would be protected as a people, because I don't think America has it within itself to change. And let's say they would change. How many more years will it take? America is the second coming of the empire called the Roman Empire. And if you know anything about the Romans, it imploded from the inside out. We'd have to wait for this new Rome to implode from the inside out. So I'd rather be working on sovereign ground and sovereignty so we can finally live in peace in this country and not be under the exploitations and pressure of the discrimination, denial of opportunity, and the racist attacks that we've experienced for decades.
And so when I talk to people about what Frederick Douglass said and others about the 4th of July, the hangings on the 4th of July, the number of things that are taking place across America. And I just happened to have on TV the other night that movie Django, right? Mm-hmm. And even the scene where the brother was had told the slave master he didn't want to fight no more. Mm-hmm. And then I always have to change when they put the dogs on him, mm-hmm. because that was that happened. Mm-hmm. You know, that happened to us during that August 4th, 1976 period, and before mm-hmm. that, but even after that, mm-hmm. or putting you between two horses in front of your wife and your children,
ripping you too,
and rip you apart. Mm-hmm. And so I understand people. You can still celebrate that day. When I say celebrate with family and friends, but don't celebrate the independence part of it, because you weren't part of that. That didn't include you at all. If you want to spend time with your family and your friends, mm-hmm. do it. But there has to be an educational component to that. My Uncle Sonny, at 91, said that when we got off our phone call last week, he's going to bring all his kids and grandkids together, right? Mm-hmm. And tell them about August 4th. Mm-hmm. 1865. Mm-hmm. Because he said if he don't tell the grandkids and his kids and the mm-hmm. great grandkids, they won't know. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. Two of the worst things that happened to Black America was Brown versus Board of Education, when we stopped educating our own students. Mm-hmm. And we said to white America, you take our students and educate them. And the other one was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, who said we can drink out of your water fountain, sit at your counter. And I know the architects mm-hmm. of the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King, who you know I love. I got more pictures of King in my house than I do my kids. Didn't foresee or didn't have a crystal ball to say to lose all the Black restaurants, the Black hotels, the Black everything. Mm-hmm. With this integration policy. Mm-hmm. What we probably should have said is y'all keep your white fountain. Mm-hmm. Give us one separate but equal. Mm-hmm. And we should have got the same thing for our schools, because we don't educate our kids. Mm-hmm. Our kids have no clue mm-hmm. about who they are. And a good example is that holiday July 4th, 1776. And anybody can prove me different that on July 4th, 1776, in this country, we were doing well. I remember the 200th celebration in 1976. We weren't doing that good. 1976, 200 years later, we're still fighting civil rights cases. And to be honest about it, brother, and you talk about winning your court cases against the police, these things right here all about that victory, that and body cameras.
Proof.
There you go. Well, you always had proof, but it wasn't white proof.
We didn't have credibility.
Great. There you go. You didn't have the proof.
Yes.
It was necessary to go in a courtroom and convince 6 or 12 Minnesotans that a officer with a badge on his chest would do a crime such as the murder of George Floyd, Philando Castile, Boogie Winston, you name it, Jamar Clark. You know what I'm talking about? So technology has really been one of our best civil rights weapons.
Because they had no way to deny it.
Had no way to deny it.
See, we had no credibility with white people, so it didn't matter where you got the white jury from. It was going to be a kangaroo court. It's that simple. But to your point, that suffering matters. You and I, our ancestors, if they had one wish, they'd wish we remember them.
That's right.
They'd wish we remember what they went through.
Brother, say that again for our audience.
Our ancestors would wish we remember them and their suffering, because when you talk about tying us between horses and oxen and ripping us apart, boiling us in oil, tar and feathering us alive, castration was popular for black men. And even when they finally counted the lynchings after slavery, they still found over 4,000, 2,700 or so in Florida alone. No one ever went to jail for the crimes they committed against men, women, and children of African blood from the west coast of Africa. So for 240 years of slavery, it wasn't just slavery, it was pure hell. And it's on us to let our ancestors who were smiling down on us with tears falling from their eyes, they wonder, do you remember me? They wonder, I went through too much for you to write me off for what I was subjected to. Remember me and tell the people about me. Tell them about the lashes in my back and how they dumped salt in them. Tell them about the women who put boulders on their chests and drowned themselves in lakes and creeks so that babies wouldn't be born in slavery. Or the women that jumped off of cliffs and mountains so their baby wouldn't be. The women that sat there in every way they could to cut the baby's tendons on their legs so he'd be handicapped and wouldn't be under the whip of slavery. They have no knowledge of the pain that we went through, that it wasn't just the women they raped. They raped the men. Some were homosexual. They raped the little boys and the little girls. He decided when you were a woman based on your monthly. At 8 or 9 years old, you're at the master's house and your mom and dad can hear you screaming all night. And I'm saying that we have to remember that as we push forward and fight forward, that we're speaking an opportunity, you and I right now, to speak about our people that they never were allowed, Tyrone. They never were allowed to even suggest you say something back. You could die. When we ran sometime, we ran with our whole families. They lynched our whole family. You understand what I'm saying? They didn't just knock off limbs. Everything was like a joke to them. You said it best when you talked about the lynchings on the holiday. If the nation wasn't involved, why did you sell the slaves on the slave block at the courthouse under that American flag? If the nation wasn't involved. And so you're talking about a morally bankrupt country did this to us for 240 some years, but 400 years of oppression. And to your point, nothing has changed for you to feel it's going to change. I understand that. Nothing has been done in all these years, over 500 years of oppression. I mean, we lost more than 1 million people in the water alone between Africa, the West Coast and the East Coast of America. They say so many ships went down in that water, you could walk from West Coast of Africa to East Coast of America on the bottom of that water on the bones of our ancestors. We paid dearly Our number one thing that we can say to any listeners who are African Americans, our ancestors would want us to remember me. They'd want you to do that. Remember me. Don't let it be in vain. Don't look the other way and act like it didn't happen. The Jews always talk about their Holocaust. They don't stop. We ain't got no business stopping. They try to make us uncomfortable. Well, we don't like talking about that. We don't like talking about racism. No, but you like doing it. You haven't stopped doing it. Every time we watch the news, we never know when it's going to happen. You destroyed our families when you separate the men and the women. Now our kids are out of order from generations of this. That means you haven't stopped oppressing us. Then you make sure that things that we need, we don't have, but the things that we don't need, you make sure we got dope. You make sure we got guns. You make sure we got bullets. You make sure you take care of our misery, but you don't allow us the things that we need.
So, brother, we only got a few minutes left. And you know I love you, man. You know that. But your passion for this work and this passion for our community, where did that come from? How can it still burn with the intensity and passion that you have for our people?
I think it's the lessons I got. The fact that we were from the Bantu tribe and we somehow went into South Africa on foot. We were captured by the Spaniards. We were taken to the Cameroons. We were sold to Kentucky to a man named McDaniel, who sold us to a Frenchman in Missouri named Bastille. The fact that I was born in Jim Crow, so I couldn't go in town across the track to be born. I was born on my grandmother's and grandfather's kitchen table. My first 3 brothers and sisters died on that table. I made it because we couldn't go in town to a hospital and get any help, any bleeding, any stitchings. There's no nurse, there's no doctor. I was the first of my mothers to survive. 30% of my mother's family was lost on the highway trying to get 170 miles to the nearest hospital that accepted blacks, and it was down in St. Louis, number 2 hospital for black people. When I came here, discrimination was just the same. We lived on the south side of Olson Highway all the way down to Bassett Creek. What brought us across the highway, they built the projects. The projects were state-ran, state-owned, and government money in it, but they had Summerfield Park in the middle. Whites were mandated to be west, blacks east, and no mixing, Minnesota. That the Jim Crow that we left in Missouri followed us to Minnesota. All the things that I went through that were so painful are the things that keep me up and running and fighting for my people. I will close this on that issue, Tyrone. All my uncles were in the Negro Baseball League. All my cousins, people were in the Negro Baseball League. On Sunday for a nickel, we're in the stadium watching the game. And we mimicked them. We imitated them. We folded our caps and we dirted up our gloves and we played baseball. And one year they thought we were the better team. They were going to allow us to play a white team. We broke out with a 12-point lead, man. I'm 9, 10 years old. At that point, the game is over. The white people got up, pushed the bullpen over, and ran out on the field to start beating all the black kids with bats. When we got to the covered bridge, you got to cross that to get across the Missouri Salt River. They blocked the bridge with a pickup truck. We had a choice, take the whooping or hit that water. We were so used to swimming in the river because we weren't allowed to go to the pool uptown. We hit that river. But I could hear my friends and my cousins holler every step of the way. And I said in Reverend McAfee's church, I never played another game of baseball.
Damn. Okay. You just answered my question, brother. That's where that passion comes from and remains burning in you. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Sister. Again, this is Brother Spike Moss, Brother Tyrone Terrill. We're definitely not, we're subbing at best for our good brother Al McFarlane and his family. Again, our sincere prayers and condolences to the family. But we've loved the opportunity to be with the community. Take care.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to thank you, Spike, and thank you, Tyrone, for this discussion and for the reminders because it's important that we know who we are and whose we are, where we came from. And I also send out my prayers to Brother Al on the loss of his mother. Okay. Well, as book review editor, I will be introducing you to our guest author today. She is a certified etiquette trainer and business coach. She is the CEO of Life Etiquette Institute. She is an author of Myah Is Introduced to Etiquette and Manners Are Memorable. And she also goes by her motto that manners are memorable, so put your best foot forward. And she has also been featured on the Fox Network. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Juliet Ms. J. Mitchell. Hey,
Good afternoon,
Ms. J.
WC. Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes, it's a pleasure to have you on the show and look forward to you talking about the history of life etiquette, your books, and of course, later on, we'll talk about an event that you have specially planned. So I'd like to start with where did your passion so far as etiquette begin? And how did that evolve? And also, how did the role of etiquette play out in our lives? How it needs to play out?
Right. Thank you for that question. Well, I'm a Southern girl and from Louisiana. And before I ever knew the word etiquette, we were living that out in daily life. So in its very basic understanding, it's about respect, respect for yourself, respect for your household, who you are, where you came from. And as a Southerner, and I can only speak for myself as being a Southerner, those ways of respecting your elders, respecting your heritage, where you came from, representing your family, your church, and your culture when you were out. So that was ingrained in us from little kids. And plus, I came from a family of 10 kids. There were actually 11 born, one deceased as an infant, but we all grew up together. You're talking about mom, dad, and all those kids in one small house. If you didn't have a way of being together, of doing what you're supposed to do, respecting other people, giving them the space, cleaning up after yourself, then it would be total chaos. So if you take that concept and bring it forward, somewhere along the line, I've heard this word etiquette. I was going, we already do this, right? But everyone are not raised with those same manners, actions, and behaviors, and it has to be taught. We were taught. I realized that some people were not taught those things, and I saw how it served me in life. And if it served me, it could serve other people. So it kind of evolved over time. I saw how doors opened for me or closed based on how I represented myself, how I treated other people, and that basic respect that just kept coming over and over again. So that became my life work after living that out in my own life, in my education, and in my career.
That's wonderful. And when it comes to etiquette, and because I see a lot of it is family based, where not just maybe your immediate family, but your mentors around you.
Yes.
How early would you say would be the start? And if someone has never been taught it, what would be some of the best ways to go about teaching and coaching etiquette?
You can actually start teaching etiquette from when your kid first start learning, right? Because we look at kids who are preschool and kindergarten age, and if they're not taught those basic ways of being in the world, you end up getting suspended in kindergarten, put in the corner, whatever consequence that belies that. Even at home, if you learn how to pick up after yourself, that's etiquette. Let me give you maybe a broader understanding. When people think about etiquette, they go, oh, yeah, being nice and polite and teaching people how to eat and how to use a knife and fork. And yes, that's included. But before you ever get there, it's about the way that you treat people and the way that you carry yourself. The manners is the way you do things. The principles is that you treat people well and that you respect other people. So at every age of development, there is a way of being. So certain things that a 1-year-old should know by the time they get 2, by the time they get in preschool and high school, by the time you go off into the work world, if you're not taught how to be with people, how to conduct yourself in a classroom, how are you going to conduct yourself in college? If you don't know how to live well with your people, how are you going to live well with a roommate? If you can't get up on time and get to school, how are you going to get up on time to go to a business? So in every area of life, which is why I call my work life etiquette, how to be in any situation.
Thank you. Thank you. So tell us more about your books, about Myah Is Introduced to Etiquette and Manners Are Memorable.
So let me finish the end of Manners Are Memorable, because you're going to see that again. It's
Okay.
Manners Are Memorable at the dining table. So that was my first entree into becoming a published author. And I see some things that I'm going to do different the next time, but it was just laying the groundwork. In other words, before you even start eating, you need to know the lay of the table. So that first book is about, what does all this mean? And let me give you a little more inspiration for that. I have a gentleman friend who had some challenges in life and ended up doing some time in prison. He wrote a program which became very popular and being accepted all around the country. So with some notoriety, he was invited to an event. It was a banquet, a gala of some type. And he was all dressed up in his tuxedo. And he's at the table, and he looked at the layout and said, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do." So I said, "What did you do?" He said, "I didn't eat." I said, "Were you hungry?" He said, "Yes, I was hungry, but I didn't know what to do, so I froze." And yeah, some people will say, "Well, just watch what everybody else do and do that thing." But in that moment, he lost all personal self-confidence, confident in one area of his life, but wasn't confident at the dining table. So he sat there, and if you don't eat, people are going to say, "Well, why aren't you eating?" "Oh, I had something before I came." I said, "Were you hungry?" He said, "Yes, I was." So after the banquet was over, he never recovered, by the way. He just sipped his water, got through it. He went to McDonald's. Here he was in a tuxedo, standing in the line at McDonald's. And he said he looked around, and it was 5 other people from that gala that was at McDonald's. So I guess they didn't know what to do either. But he said at that moment, he wished in all of this teaching and learning and grooming, no one ever taught him what all of this meant and how to use it. So oftentimes we find ourselves in this casual world, eating with our fingers. We've come full circle with that. And there are some things that you eat with your fingers. And how do you do that? If you use a knife and fork, if you use tongs, how do you do that so that you are comfortable and confident in any situation? And you don't have to worry about freezing up. You can enjoy your meal, and you can dine and have conversation because you know what is what.
That's great, because a lot of us know, a lot of us grew up with those things with our parents and things like that. But yeah, it's very informative. Now we have about a couple of minutes, so I'd like to take this time so you can tell us about your special event.
Okay, thank you very much. But I do want to just give a plug. This is Myah Is Introduced to Etiquette, because Myah is my granddaughter. And if we start teaching kids early about how to be and what does this really mean and what does that look like in our everyday lives. So here's the cover. And so I've taken that information and taken it over to the next book, which is going to be the Tea Party. For the past 12 years, I've hosted a tea party called Tea Party and Table Manners. It's a way of teaching young girls, this is for girls, but we've had some little boys to participate as well, and they're supportive adult, learning basic manners, how to introduce themselves, all in this caring environment where it's fun, it's pretty, it's in a nice environment, so that they learn how to be in that space. we've had it started in my home 12 years ago, and it's grown to this like big event now. So we're having it at St. Paul Hotel, August 13th of this year, a couple of hours of just fun and learning good food, and there are lessons as well. And the first lesson is the RSVP. So if you register for the event, you will get an invitation in the mail, and your caring adult is to help you RSVP to let us know that you will be coming.
Wonderful. Now, that being said, we're definitely looking forward. Say, those of you out there, definitely this is a must attend. So, hey, bring your princesses and RSVP for a memorable experience.
All right.
Before we close, where can we get your books?
You can get my books on Amazon. And if you go to my website, there will be links there as well. And you can always get in touch with me at lifeetiquetteinstitute@gmail.com. I not only do workshops for children, this is like a special deal to me, but my heart sings when I work with new and emerging professionals, college students, and those are entering into the professional world.
Awesome. Ms. J, I thank you for being our guest. Thank you for giving that love, honesty, and of course, let us put our best foot forward, because I've learned in the business world, hey, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
And that is true. So let me finish this. Put your best foot forward and claim your seat at the table. When you're at the table, you're better positioned for success.
Amen.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Well, we are wrapping up for Conversations with Al McFarlane. Give many thanks to our guests, our co-host Spike Moss, and Mr. Terrill'll, and Ms. J. We will be closing out. We have a message from the Minnesota Department of Health, and it goes to this. Minnesota Department of Health is hosting a COVID vaccine event at Amherst H. Walker Foundation, located at 451 North Lexington Parkway, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55104. That will be on Saturday, July 15th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The event is free and open to the public. The Department of Health is encouraging everyone in the community to attend this event to get vaccinated against COVID. Now, make sure you're protected by showing up on July 15th. Thank you very much. And hey, we'll see you on the next go round.